Awesome to welcome basketball coach, motivational speaker, filmmaker, and industry expert Tim Martin to the Basketball Podcast. Tim Martin's journey from humble beginnings to becoming one of the most respected skills trainers in the basketball community is nothing short of remarkable. His journey took a pivotal turn when he began training young athletes. His work ethic, second to none, caught the attention of rising NBA star Tyrese Maxey. Maxey, who has trained with Tim since his freshman year at South Garland High School, describes their relationship as family-oriented. Tim Martin's impact extends beyond the court. He has developed comprehensive training transformation programs for basketball players at all levels. His virtual training academy, established in 2007, has helped produce 21 NBA draft selections and assisted clients in earning over $550 million in NBA salary. Tim has worked with NBA, WNBA, NCAA, and EuroLeague champions, leaving an indelible mark on the basketball world. Tim is not only a basketball trainer, but also a motivational speaker, filmmaker, and industry expert. As the director of basketball relations for the Dwayne Wade Sneaker Company, Tim has cultivated relationships with premier names in sports, entertainment, and fashion. Tim, welcome to the Basketball Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, man, Chris. It's always good catching up with you. It's long overdue.
Longtime follower, big time fan here, and I'm so excited to have you on. And Coach, we got to start. We got to start with the journey because you have one of the most unique stories. And every day I see you on social, or I see you, or we talk, I'm just so happy for your success. Homelessness to world-renowned trainer.
Now, it's still surreal with me. I just get carried into work. When you got your head down and you locked in on doing what you're trying to do, I don't really celebrate probably like I should, to be honest, especially at this stage in my life. This is going to my 16th year doing this. And so definitely a lot of trials and tribulations, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, to say the least. My past made me who I am today. And I think that's just part of my testimony, is obviously everything that I've had to endure and overcome, it actually made me better to help others. So that's the gift in all of this, is I'm able to speak from experience on a lot of different factors.
As you said, it's probably shaped a lot of your approach. And I know a big part of your approach is a really holistic approach to player development, to person development, all these different things. So talk to us a little bit about that holistic approach.
Yeah, man, I'm a hippie at the end of the day. Like, to the core of me, myself, I'm very free spirited, and I've been blessed by my mom with that in terms of my upbringing. She did a great job of just, teaching me about people. My grandfather was a people person. And so with me moving so many different places throughout my childhood, I had an ability to be able to tap into other cultures and experience a lot and see a lot. That's the other thing. You can't unsee things and you can't unhear things as you grow. I was very blessed in that regard. And so, in fact, my infatuation with sociology and astrology and psychology, even with physiology, when we talk a lot about body language and stuff, these are just all these different mechanisms and tools that I used organically into my approach of my teaching. And so for me, I think as coaches, a lot of us could get redundant in terms of our speech when we're teaching. And I think Bruce Lee said it the best. For me, my job is to find 10,000 ways to say the same thing. So you have to get creative in your approach and be authentic too. A lot of these players, whether they're middle school, high school kids, or even in the NBA, you're dealing with a lot of smart players. And so for me, it's just trying to not reinvent the wheel, but just try to make it my own version. And so the holistic way is the way to go for me.
It's wonderful to hear you talk about that. And that a great example of that would be Tyrese Maxey, someone that you've worked with for so long. And again, he could get tired of hearing the same thing from you if you don't phrase it in different ways. So maybe talk a little bit about how special that relationship has been in your journey, but even more so to see that he's still rising. So clearly the way you're saying things has been helping.
Yeah, no, man, proud is an understatement. Tyrese is literally, I know everybody uses the term little bro, but now that's family right there, like in and out. He comes from a great family, but I think for us, we've always had that synergy. I think we just had a natural connection that sometimes I don't even have to say anything. I could just look at Tyrese and just be like, man, you know what you need to do. And over time, I think just repping certain things out. We worked on his floater for 6 months in high school. And I think over a period of time, when he started having these small wins in practice and in games, he would understand, oh, this stuff really works. His buy-in was very early. And I think just to see where he's at, the coolest thing for me personally is just all the conversations we had years ago talking about, hey, because I'm big on specifics. When you're talking about your goals, I need details. And so saying I'm gonna be the most improved player, he was saying that I'm gonna be an NBA All-Star. And for everything to come to fruition, it was already expected from both of us. But at the end of the day, you still gotta celebrate those victories when they happen.
And the challenge working with a player like that is obviously how do you keep pushing him to improve
Mhm.
while maintaining confidence? And that seems to be one of the challenges for trainers in general and coaches in general is I've
Mhm.
got to push them to get better, but I've got to maintain their confidence at the same time.
Right. Now, and this is just a theory of mine, but when with this newer generation, I'm the last of the Mohicans, right? Where it was the old my way or the highway kind of thing in our generation. But with this newer generation, they have so much access to information. And so for me to keep him just curious, I love asking questions. So I don't really go into the gym with any of my players lecturing. I try to keep the engagement going by having conversations. And I think that allows the player one to at least let their mind wander and use their imagination and have a say. Because if I can empower you to feel like you're a part of this development and you like this move as opposed to this move, now it actually becomes more interesting in the subject matter and how we progress through things. It's more not so much innovative, but it's more attractive. And I think that's what keeps the players engaged over time. Because if it's just me saying we're going to do X, Y, Z, anybody's going to tune you out after a few weeks.
What's remarkable to me in watching your journey for all these years is clearly we know it. There's been other trainers that have locked in with a future pro at some point in their journey.
Mhm.
But what's remarkable about you is how not only have you kept Tyrese improving, but you've expanded into different business ideas, different types of players. Like, really, again, there's no pigeonholing Tim Martin at all. And has
Yeah.
that always been a part of your mindset, this expansive mind?
Yeah. I view myself, and I don't want to be self-proclaimed, but I look at the Jay-Z's of the world on how Jay-Z, I looked at his track record and his business model where you used hip hop to come in to get your foot in the door. And then as you progress into your craft and you get better, you have these certain business endeavors that you could build around to where it's a clothing line, like my clothing line with a beautiful struggle. So we selling merchandise. I'm building out my app. I'm consulting with Li Ning and Dwayne Wade's shoe company. And so doing all these different ventures on the side, that's just coming through relationships. We both know if it wasn't for that ball, we're probably not going to really be able to be introduced accordingly. And the universe just has a special way of connecting you with the right people. And the more you put into this business, the more you get out. And so that was always my philosophy. I just didn't want to have a 9 to 5 and create my own schedule. So that was the set point for me. And then my exit strategy is just being around the game I love, spending more time with my loved ones and traveling the world. And God has definitely blessed me to do so.
I'd love to hear your advice. You mentioned self-promotion, which is one of the tricky parts for both of us. We run
Yeah.
an online brand, and to a certain extent, we want to sell ourselves without selling ourselves. So, can
Mhm.
you give any advice to those in coaching or those in the training world about how to promote yourself without coming across as self-promotional?
Yeah, dude, I ain't gonna lie. That's always I don't even want to say a weakness, but something that's make me uncomfortable because I love promoting everybody else. But then in that, you cut yourself out of a lot of different opportunities if you don't self-promote. And so I think for me, it's to allow it to come out organically. If you're talking about shoes, for example, I'm definitely going to go ahead and throw the tidbit of leaning. I feel like we have the number one brand out there. We got Dwayne Wade, Jimmy Butler, D'Angelo Russell, all these different players. But yeah, I think it's just you have to find the right time to do it. And then also coming at it from a space of being proud, like the message, for example, with the beautiful struggle. I think everybody could relate with that because it's a journey for us all. It's something that you clearly had an experience on your come up. You just not ever developing it up on the up and up, but you have to deal with the downfalls and it's a roller coaster. And so I think whatever brands that you represent or whatever your brand is to try to curate a conversation to where it's relatable to the consumer or a certain target audience that you could find ways to connect with. And another way is obviously just the storytelling. Telling your own personal testimony will always get people engaged and interested in what you have to offer.
Absolutely great advice. And particularly your origin story. You talk about a superhero or you talk about the power of myth, Joseph Campbell. The origin story is something that's just so powerful. And I love that about your journey, that origin story always comes back to just, again, the power of doing things the right way. And you've done that. It's beautiful. You mentioned Angel Reese, for example. So maybe let's go there in terms of not her specifically, but just that type of role now for you
Mhm.
transitioning from college to pro, which I know you spent a lot of time with different players in that world. Can you talk about some of the challenges and maybe some of the things that you do to help them overcome some of those future possible challenges?
Yeah, so I think The Rock said this one time and it hit me directly in terms of you have to have an anchor, right? And so I think for Angel, I got to get with her this week. She's about to play the Dallas Wings a couple times this week. And so one of the things that I'm stressing to her currently is what's your approach looking like? I don't even care about basketball, but what's your daily routine like? Because when you have star status, you have to do interviews, you have to do appearances, you have thousands of people calling you asking for something. And so I think for her, it's okay, we have to have an anchor, something that you could have some alone time, whether it's your morning routine, before shoot around or before practice, something that you could always have that's consistent to where mentally you're able to diagnose any problems. Like for me, my anchor is going for a morning walk, right? So before I get into the gym, I got to have a self check-in time where I'm drinking my coffee. I'm just trying to engage my emotional state, trying to see where I'm at, the things that I need to accomplish, etc. But for Angel, I think as a rookie, getting accustomed to the time differences, and you may be on the East Coast in New York, and then you have to play in LA the next. So I think the day-to-day regimen is a lot different because now you have so much free time. How are you going to fill those holes of your time with productive things that you could do to enhance as a player, as opposed in college? Your whole schedule is already laid out. You have to go to school, you have team practice, and then you're only playing like maybe what, 2 games a week. So just getting adjusted to more of the off-court stuff, I think is the primary thing that we talk about. Because the basketball that's the easy stuff to take care of. But the routine prior to the game, I think is essential for any player making that next step.
I love that. I love you connecting it to something that helps ground you as a person and brings you back to your center or your balance, whatever that may be. And then a player like Nick Claxton, who obviously has had success in the NBA and now, again, is continuing to try and rise. What are some things prior to moving into an offseason with a player like that are you doing?
Yeah, so for Nick, it's a simple question is what do you want? You get the 200 million, 150 million, okay, cool. What's next? How are you like how one outside of the money, what's your purpose now at this stage in your career? Because when you was coming out of the University of Georgia, you just wanted to make it to the NBA. And then when you made it to the NBA, you had to overcome certain injuries. And then you was playing from the second or third backup center to where now you wanted to become a starting center. So now you're one of 30 guys in the world that's starting for a potential, not just playoff team, but there's championship admirations with the new coaching staff coming in. So it's okay. We have to elevate our goals. We have to elevate the way we think, the way we approach tactics, all of that. And it's more so putting it on him to get him a clear vision. I don't like vague approaches. Because if I was to ask you what makes you happy, most people will say, oh, spending time with friends. No, I said, what makes you happy? So just refining some things in terms of his vision and to be specific as possible, I think that really gives us a blueprint and a map for us to go from here to there and be able to execute our strategies. But yeah, Nick's been great. He's definitely on the right path. And just like Maxey and Reese and all these other players, I'm extremely proud of him and his progress over the years.
Is complacency one of the biggest challenges in general? It's human nature to say, I've made it, I'm done it, I'm secure for the rest of my life. And as you said, now getting to that point of saying specifically, okay, but what is your goal? What do you want to do now?
Yeah. Now, I think basketball, I can see a lot of that, not just with my players. I think that's just human nature for anybody. Once you give me 100 million at 25 years old, I don't know where I'm at. You know what I mean? So it's easy to fall in under that trap. But for me, I'm obsessed with developing as a human being. And so it's very seldom that with the Wembanyamas and all these other players, it's very seldom we talk about basketball. because for me, I'm trying to challenge them in other ways to maybe become a better speaker in their interviews. What are you doing from a charity standpoint? What are you interested in now? Is it real estate, or what books are you reading? Because I've never met anybody that's mastered life, period. There's always something that we could get better at. And if you have mastered a craft at something else, then let's find a new venture for you to tap into and then learn something new, whether it's playing the guitar, the piano. I don't know. Let's create a new hobby and get engaged in that to try to spice things up. So it's a wide variety of things that I'm always interested in throwing out there.
That's such a great point there about connecting them to the fact that obviously they had such a curiosity and such a desire to improve as a basketball player. So applying that to other aspects of your life keeps you engaged in your life more than just
Yes.
basketball at that point. I love that. That's really well said. And talk to us quickly about Wemby. Just give us the origin story. How did you get connected with Wemby?
Yeah, so his agent, Boona Njai, I was working with a lot of his players prior, from Rudy Gobert to a lot of the French athletes that he has. Some of them didn't even make it into the league, but some of the overseas guys. And he's actually based out of Dallas as well. So we just crossed paths, and he would always tell me about a kid he had in France. He was going to be the next big thing. And for me, I hear that all the time, especially from parents or other college coaches. Hey, I got this player. He's really good. But when I saw him, what stood out wasn't even the physical prowess of him. It was his way of articulating his ideas in his conversation. I knew very early that this is probably one of the smartest people I'll ever meet, because the way he thinks is beyond being eccentric. He's one of a kind. And so I think the label, the alien, the nickname, the alien, is very fitting because he's not of this planet. I can't even explain it, but he's one of one for sure.
And it makes sense that in this sense as well, based on what you just said, and from watching him, there's no blueprint for him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got to be something that kind of, again, all these experiences that have helped shaped you and helped you shape other players
Yeah.
come into this whole perfect kind of synergy right now, isn't it? Because there's no blueprint. What do you do with this guy? How do you help him get better when we don't know what he's capable of?
Yeah, that's the cool thing is I feel like all these players that I've worked with and were like my guinea pigs in the lab, if you will, I've been able to experiment so much over these 16 years. And I'm taking everything that I've learned and accumulated from some of these greats, the Trey Youngs, the Tyrese Maxeys, the Nick Claxtons. I'm just putting it all into Victor. And I don't know, you ever seen that cartoon, Big Hero 6, the Disney movie?
I have not.
Oh, well, so essentially the whole method of the movie is like this. You got this small dude, he creates this big robot, and he puts the artificial intelligence in the robot and everything, and now the robot would move just like he would. And
Mhm.
so that's the fun part about working with Wimby, is I get to like just try different things with him, whether it's the 1 foot 3 point shot or the fadeaways or whatever, because he is a creative player. So there's definitely no limits for him. But for me as a trainer, I have fun with it just because we get to experiment a little bit more than what you would with any other player.
Now, what are the challenges of experimenting too much? Because again, other people, coaches, trainers might be thinking here that if I try too many different things, then they're not doing what they're actually good at.
Yeah. So to be honest, I've always had a rule of three. That's my theory. And so if you work in the off season, typically every player, whether you're in middle school, high school, college, or in the NBA, you have about 90 days. So it's like a probation period. You get 90 days, and each month we're focusing on just one thing. Because if we're going to add and expand his game, the one thing that we can't do, because we're going to erase his muscle memory by default, is by working on everything. So if we have, just like before, we would work on his mid post reads, right? Just how he's catching the ball, right, with his footwork. Then how he's fading away on his shot, or is he standing up straight? So we would work on all these different mechanical elements in the mid post for like just a whole month. So every time we come into the gym, we already had a focus point, we had a theme, and we would just try to rep out every scenario out of the mid post. Once we get comfortable with that, we layer it out to the 3 point line. Maybe we focusing on his dribble drives or just his setup moves in isolation, and just work on that for a month. And so that's been the theory, not just with him, but with all my players, is the rule of three. Focus on three things all summer. And then by training camp, definitely be able to self-correct your mistakes.
I love that idea. And it helps you stay focused on the things that can be improved
Yeah.
and then obviously demonstrate the improvement. Because the other part of this for you, I know, and you mentioned that relative to the floaters of Tyrese Maxey, one of the challenges for coaches, trainers is to say what we worked on is actually helping you. And
Yeah.
that's a really important sell for you to the player, isn't it? And talk to us a little bit about that process because that's a big part of all coaching.
Yeah, nah. So my theory is this, is that if we're going to work on something in a one-on-one situation, that's going to take us at least 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, because it's what, 21 days to form a habit, right? So if I'm working with a player, I need them to lock in on the technicality of a floater for 2 to 3 weeks. And I'm using Maxi as an example. Now, in those weeks, once we figure out how we need to pick up the ball, how we need to finish with our touch and all that is precise, then we're going to go into one-on-one scenarios. I'm a big fan, bones over cones. That's my motto, right? Because this is still a reactionary sport. And I think a lot of coaches and trainers tend to forget that because in this era, players just don't play enough pickup. And I know you talk about that.
All the time, yeah.
I need them to have some form of critical thinking and mentally be able to self-correct themselves. If you have so many voices coming at you, telling you what to do, I don't think you could really ever develop because you're always waiting on somebody to correct you. And so having the one-on-one segment and then building up to one-on-one and then two-on-two and then really just three-on-three. I really don't even tap into the 5-on-5 in off season because to me, the game is played in threes. And I need guys getting as much touches as possible in these scenarios where in the first game, we may just get all floaters. The second game, we may just do nothing but pick and roll. So these side mini games is another huge component to all these players' development, is allowing them to just freestyle a little bit.
Take us deeper into that then. When you're talking about playing 3-on-3 or 2-on-2 in particular, who are they playing against? Who are they playing with? What is that mindset? Because I know that's sometimes the challenge for these situations. And I know you can help shape that for coaches who are trying to understand it.
Yeah. So the first part is I want them to do the moves against my coaches. So I have a staff. And the reason why is because we're older. We can't move like NBA guys. But in theory, the first part of the reason to that is because I want the players to have confidence doing whatever we're working on against weaker opponents, so to speak. So if they feel like they could get their move off a couple of times and see the ball go through the net or whatever the scenario is, if they have these small wins for a day or two, and then by day 3 or day 4, okay, now we got to do it against other pros or more elite athletic players. And then we could just tailor that and discuss what we need to improve on from there. But I don't never just let them work on a move and then play one-on-one against other pros because there's a buildup. And I feel like confidence is something that's either overlooked or undertaught. And we all know if you have confidence, I've had a lot of players virtually zero skill, but through the roof confidence, and they're effective on the court because, and that's my biggest thing is just teaching confidence as opposed to other methods. That's a big time play for me.
So I love that mindset of that. And then bones over cones, obviously, we were in agreement there. So to a certain extent, it starts off a little bit guided in terms of playing against your coaches. And
Yeah.
then at what point do you evolve it into a little bit more freer and live in terms of some of the reads and decisions? Because clearly, when I think about some of the players you work with, I look at them and go, wow, they're very creative. They're creative finishers. They're creative at finding solutions. And the tendency sometimes for us as coaches is that we do so much rote memorization that we take away the creativity and the freedom.
Yeah. Now I'm an avid fan of Salvador Dali and Basquiat and Andy Warhol and some of these painters. My grandfather was a painter. And so for me, my job is to give them the tools, the paintbrushes and the colors. I'm gonna set the canvas, right? And now I want them to have some kind of creativity and paint their own picture, if you will. And so when we're going through these workouts, my job is to not teach you so many moves, but bring the geometry in the game because there's a lot of angles and pace is another thing that we stress on. And when I do set up the scenario, I try to allow the player to be able to think freely under a condition. I got one condition. I use seconds. So before I used to do, okay, you got 3 dribbles to create a shot. But what I've learned over the course of time is the neurology aspect of it, to where instead of 3 dribbles, I'll say 3 or 4 seconds. Because technically it's about what, 1 second per dribble, right? And in that, when you're counting down, you say 4, 3, 2, 1. The player now not only has the, remember, you got a clock you're working against, but now you really have to be more efficient off the catch in whatever you're doing. And so I think that's another element that we stress is, I'm going to give you some freedom. These are the guidelines and the parameters that you have to operate in these spots. And we're going to just rep that out to where if you don't have success, okay, let's go back to having a conversation. And it's just a wash and repeat, trial and error kind of thing. And eventually by the end of the summer, most of the players master that synergy.
And that connects to me with what I know about you, which is as well as the importance of the mental side for you is to be able to put some type of pressure on them so that they've learned how to handle that type of pressure. So that's one example of that. Can you give us some other examples of how you can put pressure on them to be able to learn how to cope with the mental side?
Yeah, so another drill I like doing is can't miss 2 in a row. So I'll say, hey, we're going to go 5-spot shooting, right? The goal is to try to make 10 in each spot, total of 50. If you can't miss 2 in a row, or if you miss 1, I need to see something change in your physiology, right? You can't just keep shooting the same way and expecting a different result. So what I do is I try to end every workout with can't miss 2 in a row. And what that does is it sets the bars where maybe on Monday they only make 30. So the first thing they want to do is ask me, hey, coach, can I do it again? My response is no. I want you hungry coming into the gym on Tuesday. And so now, just off of that, sometimes when you pull things from people, and are they responding or are they reacting? I want to see what they're going to do when I pull something away in terms of an opportunity. And so from that, we build in that philosophy. But when I'm trying to create a stressful environment, those are little subtleties that I'll do in some of my drills. But like I said, there's always a method behind my madness. A lot of people may not understand it, but for me, I've had a lot of experience making a lot of mistakes in this game, seeing what works, what doesn't work. And so over time, like I said, I got a few things in my bag.
The beautiful thing in knowing you is you're not done with making those mistakes because you're
Right.
continuing to strive to get better and to challenge your paradigm of how you do things as well. And I love that as well. So maybe talk to us a little bit about what has changed the most over the last 5 years in your approach that has made you even better as a coach trainer.
It's made me better. I think patience, man, to be honest. My son getting older, and I think that just comes with age. When you're able to have the ability to turn knowledge into wisdom, you start understanding what this game of life is about. And you don't take everything so personal. I still do, to be honest, with certain things. And I think naturally as a competitor, you always want to be the best and have the best results come at you. But traveling has definitely humbled me, just seeing how a lot of things work around this world, whether it's in China, Africa, Europe. And so I think what's made me a better person is just having even more conversations with people like yourself or other people from walks of life, and seeing what they have to endure. Because especially as coaches and trainers, and they call us this, right? But we're more entrepreneurs. We're still businessmen at the end of the day. And there's a lot of stress that comes with that, on trying to figure out where your next dollar is coming, and how do you separate from the marketplace? How do you find your next dollar? And so I think it's a collaborative aspect of all those things that has taught me. And then also I'm very big on teaching myself some things to improve as a person, whether it's my speech, my mannerisms, my body language, my posture, certain things that I know I got to get better at, but that's just a part of this whole experience.
Absolutely. And being an entrepreneur is not as easy as it seems from the outside. Much easier at this point in our lives than it was when we started.
Yeah. Yeah. This is before, man, I was doing this before YouTube, before social media. And conversely, like on the opposite side is I'm trying to get away from all that at certain points. Because when you get out the gym, you need some time to decompress. And then you still have to be a dad. You still have to be a husband. You still have to do all these other things. I think for me, balance comes back to what I alluded to earlier in terms of that 1 or 2 things that you do consistently every day, that you know that no matter what how your day goes, you could always revert back to that one thing that keeps you grounded and stay consistent in that. That's a whole nother story. That's not easy to do with all the distractions going on in this world.
It's not easy, I know. And maybe if you could just take us through, you don't have to use specific examples, but you meet with, say, an NBA coaching staff or coach or something like that to prepare for an off season with a specific player. Can you
Mhm.
take us through what that process, what that communication looks like back and forth? Take us on the inside of what that looks like.
Yeah, so the first thing I do is I just let it be known like this is a collaborative process. So this is what I'm trying to focus on. This is just what I know about the player and what I feel like he needs to get better at. And what I see an issue is a lot of trainers will work with players and they're focusing on like a move, right? And they're focusing too much on dribble moves or whatever the case, step back threes and stuff. And it's just no. One, you got to know your player, right? Then you got to look at the scenario and what their role is for the team. Because my job is to get is the player as many minutes. First off, it's not about how many points they need to score or increasing shooting percentages. I'm thinking, how can I get this player to be on the floor as much as possible? I need every player to try to play 48 minutes in a game, which is nobody's doing that. But if you're on the floor, that means you're going to have more opportunities to do more things. So when I'm talking to these staff, I want to know what they're expecting. What are their expectations for this player? How are they going to utilize them in certain spots of the floor, whether it's in transition, in the half court set, if it's in horns or whatever the formations are on the offensive set, and just build a curriculum from that. And then just correlate the information that I feel has been working when we're working out. So by the time they get to training camp, I think we're all on the same page because you don't want to divide and conquer. That causes too many problems. And just being a former coach, I know how much hell it is when you have a game plan and then you have all these external voices getting to your players, telling them to do something separately. It just doesn't help the whole dynamic of what you guys are trying to build.
And that's something that's changed quite a bit over the last 5 years is that NBA coaching staffs, in particular in the offseason, are much more involved and engaged with their players, whether it's traveling out to Los Angeles to spend time with the player. So when they do that, are they collaboratively working with you or are those separate type of things?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. Sometimes for me, they know I know what I'm doing, so they just sit back and then take the guys out to dinner or whatever. But for me, I'm still yearning for knowledge and at the same time making sure that I'm on the same page with the staff. I know what I'm doing, but then at the same time, what if it's completely different from what the coaches expect them to do? So I think those conversations just have to be had because they're in control of the players' minutes. And so for me, I know I'm in control of the development side for even in season. A lot of players retain me and keep me on contract, but it's again, it's I'm really an extension of the staff or the organization. That's how I look at it.
I love that collaborative approach to it. And yeah, I was going to go there with that. So in season, take us through a little bit of your role in season with a player that you're still with contract with.
Yeah, so man, that's more of a mental side of things. Because you really don't have a lot of time to get in the gym. And if you do, you damn sure don't want to like tweak an ankle or have something like an injury happen on your watch. Making sure that the plan that we had in the summer is being executed throughout the season. A lot of the times, if a player is going through a slump, it has everything to do with off court. Maybe it's with a girlfriend or family issues or something like that. So it's my hat kind of changes from a developer to a counselor and just making sure that they're in a good frame of mind and having their mind where it needs to be to where they can perform at a high level.
And then does the coaching staff continue to communicate with you? If, let's say, if a player is having some struggles or there's having some ups and downs, is that a collaborative process with you at that point? Or is that sometimes, again, staff dependent, independent? It depends.
Yeah, it's very seldom I'll get a call from the staff. Sometimes they may just pick my brain or just let me know what they're trying to do in terms of the adjustment aspect of it, whether it's playing time or their role. Those coaches, you have what typically anywhere 10 to 12 members on a team. They're all trying to figure it out themselves. And I think as a staff, you don't want to bring in even more voices to just complicate things. And so I think, especially when you're building culture for an organization, I think in season, in those 82 games, you're trying to isolate your team and your players as much as possible. But if it gets really bad, that's usually where I get the calls.
Let's shift our focus because one of the things that I value about you is that you spent a lot of time in the youth space and you continue to spend a lot of time in the youth space because it really matters to you in terms of development of basketball for players at all levels. So talk to us a little bit about youth basketball right now in terms of some of the things that you value the most and you feel that we can improve the most about youth basketball and the improvement of youth players.
Yeah, my son's in seventh grade. He's 13. So I work with his team. And I think what we got to do a better job of is just putting more emphasis in the developing side, which means letting players understand how to play basketball. You hear all these narratives online about players are more skilled than ever. But when I go to Europe, the players are just, I'm not saying they're not as skilled, but they just know how to play, especially off the ball. 90% of the game is played off the ball. And what I love about European basketball is the emphasis on team and not even on the court, whether it's in practices or whatever. But I feel like they do a better job of building the camaraderie and the chemistry off the court, having more dinners together, taking trips together as teams. You got 13, 14-year-olds that may spend the night at somebody's house and play video games all night. And I think we lost that in our culture here in the States, because when I was growing up, that's all I really remember. I don't remember winning games or 13U tournaments and getting trophies. I remember hanging out at the hotels with my friends and chopping it up. And then we got to compete collectively on the court together. So I think that's another issue I see, because you have a lot of these kids playing on 2 to 3 different teams. They get done with one game in a tournament and then they're shooting off to go play with another team, and nobody's really sticking together, just like the transfer portal. You got all these kids moving from AAU program to AAU program, and it's just chaos, man, to be honest. And then that's another reason why, as they get older, they never deal with anything, because everything's been allowed to just move on if it's not going your way. And so I think it's not a basketball issue. I think it's more of a morality and character issue that we got to do a better job here in the States.
I can echo that. And again, it's not always fault of the AAU program or the coach. We're not saying that, but the system in place, for example, for one of my daughters, she's essentially never played with the same roster any single weekend of the
Yeah,
whole AAU season.
yeah,
So to think about forming team habits and team, as you said, team bonding or these type of memories that exist, it's really a challenge, isn't
yeah.
it? And beyond that, take us to Europe a little bit, because I think it's easy to say, oh, Europe does it better. And it's not necessarily that they do it better, they do it differently, where the
Mhm.
focus is more within a 1 to 2 year period that they're playing within a team, within the same club. And there's this cohesive philosophy of development that revolves around practice to game and not just game to game.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing that I've seen when I go over there is everybody understands the big picture. There's no need to try to get this scholarship in seventh or eighth grade. Nobody really cares about that. It's, hey, I need my son to be with a good coach that I feel like really loves my child and is going to teach them not just about basketball, but about life lessons. And in that, over the course of time, that's how these players develop, because you see it in the league. A lot of the players that don't have issues off the court are from Europe. And it's because they usually have high character, or they have certain characteristics that are taught from a young age through these programs. And so, again, I'm not knocking the US for anything, but when we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and look at things that we can do to get better, I think there's been a definitive shift from Europe and the States. And so in Europe, they just do a phenomenal job of teaching things from a traditional standpoint.
I agree. And again, there's a lot of good voices that are pushing some change forward, and we're going to continue to do that. And I know you will as well. Talk to me a little bit about, just as a from a player perspective, what is one of the most common things that players ask you in terms of advice, whether it's a young player. Let's talk about young developing players, say high school and college players.
Everybody wants to get to the next level. And so for me, I've been famous for being said, or telling a lot of players, well, you got to make your bed. That's the first thing. If you can't even commit to making your bed every single day, to me, there's just no way in hell you're going to be able to get to the next level. Because if you can't commit to doing the little things, you're not going to be committed to going to the gym every day and doing what's asked of you. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that I tell players when asked, what can I do to get to the next level? And then outside of that is just how studious are you really, how curious are you about your own development? Because the dribble moves is not the way. And I'm not knocking dribble moves. Everybody needs a handle and be able to create, but do you know how to play without the ball in your hands? Because if you learn those essences or instances of the game, naturally somebody's going to find a role for you. But if you have to have the ball in your hands to be effective on the court, you're already cutting your chances, not even in half, but essentially it's almost impossible to continue to graduate to the next level of basketball if you don't know how to play.
I can knock the dribble moves. If they're only doing dribble moves, and this is to parents mainly, but also to coaches and players to understand, if you're only doing dribble moves and there's
Yeah,
never an opportunity to apply those dribble moves,
yeah,
then again, I don't understand the point of
right.
that. When that's we've both seen it, and it seems to be the default for all coaches, trainers in the offseason is just dribble moves. And how many dribble moves do you actually need to be effective?
Yeah, and the irony in that is, at least for me, that's when I had to figure out ways to articulate things to keep it to keep the engagement. Because there's still times I'm in the gym with certain players, and you got always two or three kids just looking up at the ceiling when you're talking, right? Especially if you're doing off court stuff, off ball stuff, like coming off pin downs or just technicalities of a back screen, like working on screening or what have you. But for me, it's to one, have the right energy as a teacher. If I'm bringing good energy and I'm making it a fun, competitive environment, it doesn't matter really what we work on. The players are going to be in tune with the subject matter, and that's hard for a lot of coaches and trainers to do without teaching them the dribble moves, because that's what keeps the players coming back. That's honestly that's what sells. But the essence of actually getting a player to go from here to there, we both know you got to work on a little bit of everything accordingly.
I'm not knocking trainers because again, at the end of the day, it's what you just said. Look,
Mhm.
you're trying to make a living, you're trying to do this as extra income, whatever it is. We're trying to find a way to bring them back because that helps us and hopefully it helps the player. But definitely, I think there's better ways, and you've articulated that throughout. More so from the coach perspective or the trainer perspective. What type of questions do they ask you most frequently that they seek out your advice on?
You said most coaches and trainers.
Yeah,
What
most coaches or trainers, when they're asking Tim Martin for advice, what are some of the things that they're asking?
I think the biggest thing is like the business model aspect of how to just grow their business. And that's something that I talk about in my members only network. And I'm gonna plug it right away. It's just at timmartiniq.com. But one of the things that we do is a couple months or a couple times after each month, we discuss on how to really scale your business. Everything from development to your curriculum to marketing and things of that nature. But that's really the biggest thing, because what I always shut down first first point is you don't need NBA players to do this at a high level. I know a lot of players or a lot of trainers that are good friends of mine that maybe only have one or two NBA guys on their resume, but they do a good job of being consistent with their promotions or their events and all these different things. That's usually the biggest thing. And then I would say going and shooting and just get into the paint and create for others. So a lot of playmaking stuff.
Love it. And you mentioned the business side. So let's dive a little bit deeper here as we wrap up. But the business side is the biggest challenge, isn't it? Because it doesn't necessarily correlate the number of followers to the actual business. And that seems to be a disconnect. A lot of the questions that I get asked from people is, well, wait, I have 70,000 followers on TikTok, but I'm not making the type of money I thought. Those don't always correlate, do they?
No, they don't. And I think that's always been a challenge for not just myself, but for everybody in this business. Again, being an entrepreneur, there's no guarantees. So if you're not following up on your calls and you're not engaging with your target audience in some form of fashion, they're going to go on to the next person that's giving them that information. And so how you package your information, how you market and brand yourself, for me, it's always been through the authenticity. I try to humanize everything that I do to be able to connect with my audience. And everybody has their own methods. And for me, what's worked is really just the word of mouth. That's always been my bread and butter, is letting my name speak for itself. But when you do start trying to turn the corner, it's not even so much about being creative. It's more about the consistency behind it. And I got a lot of respect for you with all the content that you've been able to promote and share over the years. I know that's been a staple in your business model. And that's really the essence of what I do each and every day is just follow up, reach out to people, check on, and just tap into your network. And again, with the members only network that we have, that's the whole genre or theme of what we do is getting coaches from around the world and connecting them with other coaches to try to expand their name and their brand.
And to plug your membership community, I do think that's the piece that will impact people the most. It's not the basketball side, it's the understanding the business side from building network and knowledge and connecting that knowledge to your network. Those things are so important. So obviously so happy you're doing that and having great success in sharing that side of things.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the platform. And like I said, everybody that was trying to find me, just go to timmartiniq.com. And that's something that I'm doing a better job of just not just sharing information and knowledge, but just connecting people. I think being a liaison in the game of basketball will always put everybody in the right position to have success. And when you empower others, the universe will always find a way to reward you in return. So I'm a firm believer in that.
Tim, this has been awesome. I'm so grateful to be able to have you share with us, and timmartiniq.com, place to go see coaches, go check it out. But the one reason to follow you is because look, it's never boring. There's always something coming with Tim. And I love
Yeah.
that, man. You have such a passion for this, and I'm just so grateful that it comes across so authentically, and it's not just asking, it's giving. And I've received so much from you. So it's long overdue to be able to have you on here. And I just feel like you approach it the right way.
No, thank you so much, man. Like I said, I'm gonna be sharing a lot more on my website at timmartiniq.com. I got a virtual academy I got coming out we got some more programs I'm about to launch. Also, I got a world tour coming up. So if anybody's interested, contact us on the website and we could book an event. But man, I can't thank you enough for just sharing your platform and what you do for the game. I think real recognizes real, and just our friendship over the years is definitely grown, and I look forward to seeing what you have coming up and sharing more knowledge to the masses. So thank you.